The hearing room felt like a pressure chamber, silent, controlled, the kind of place where truth rarely walks in on its own. The walls were lined with polished wood, carved so precisely it looked like even the grain itself was afraid to step out of line. Cameras perched overhead like metal vultures, waiting for a moment of weakness. Staffers whispered behind their folders. Senators adjusted microphones that didn't need adjusting. And in the middle of all this carefully staged seriousness, Rand Paul walked in with the kind of calm that only comes from someone who believes they have already won. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't rattled. He took his seat as though he had all the time in the world. He slowly arranged his papers, deliberate, almost theatrical, like a surgeon preparing instruments before a delicate procedure. He knew the exact moment the cameras turned toward him. His shoulders straightened by a fraction of an inch. The room hadn't shifted yet, but the air had. Across from him sat Secretary Kristi Noem, her posture rigid, her fingers laced tightly together on the desk. You could tell she had been briefed by a dozen advisors. You could almost hear them in her ears. Stay calm. Stick to the numbers. Pivot to security priorities. Don't let him corner you. But Rand Paul wasn't here for a political sparring match. He wasn't here to trade talking points. Not this time. Today, he came armed with something far more dangerous. Simple math. The kind of math that doesn't lie. The kind that doesn't care about political narratives. The kind that exposes everything. He leaned into his microphone, not aggressively, but with a surgeon's confidence, someone who knows the incision will cut cleanly. Secretary Noem, he began, let's talk about the wall. Her eyes flickered. Just a millimeter. Barely noticeable. But enough. We have approximately 1,950 miles along the Mexican border, Paul continued, his tone almost casual. We've fenced or walled about 700 miles. Realistically, you'd be looking at under 1,000 miles left. He paused, as though laying out a puzzle for a child. And at roughly $12 million per mile, that's about $12 billion. He set the numbers down like a chess player placing a pawn. Then he looked up, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. But the administration is asking for $46.5 billion. The silence snapped tight around them. Where, he said, his voice now steady as a hammer, is the rest of the money going? There it was. The question. Not shouted, not dramatized, just delivered with the precision of someone who knew the answer didn't exist. Noem shuffled through her papers too quickly, like someone looking for a page she hoped might magically appear. Well, Senator, we have 702 miles of wall today, and 598 of that is steel. We've issued contracts, some are pending, and... Rand didn't blink. His face didn't change. His calm became a mirror that made her nervousness louder. She continued, since the president took office, over 70 miles have been erected, and... Paul cut in gently, but firmly. That doesn't answer the math, Secretary. Her face tightened, just slightly, but in a room this tense, even a breath out of rhythm was noticeable. You could build 1,000 miles for $12 billion, he said. You're asking for $46 billion. We're off by a factor of 4. Where is the rest of the money going? His voice stayed quiet, almost unnervingly quiet. And that's when the first crack appeared. Noem swallowed. We'll get you the specifics on that, she said. There it was. Not a rebuttal. Not a counter-argument. A retreat. A promise to follow up. A placeholder for a truth she didn't have. And the cameras caught all of it. The staffers behind her shifted. One of them pressed his lips together to hide the panic. Another tapped a pen nervously against a notebook. They could feel the moment slipping away. They could feel the story rewriting itself in real time, and they had no script prepared for this version. Paul leaned back slightly, not arrogantly, but as though confirming what he already suspected. He continued the questioning, but the tone of the room had changed. The balance of power had shifted. The moment he exposed the hole in the math, the confidence around Noem evaporated like steam. But Paul wasn't finished. Not even close. "Let's talk about DHS providing security for the Super Bowl," he said suddenly, changing direction with surgical precision. "The NFL makes billions. Huge profits. But it's the American taxpayer, regular people who can't afford a single Super Bowl ticket, who pay for their security." This time, Noem didn't even shuffle her pages. She knew she didn't have the answer. "Well, not to my knowledge," she murmured. Paul's eyebrows lifted just slightly, an expression of disbelief disguised as patience. "And FIFA?" he asked. "The World Cup? Billion-dollar events. Do they pay DHS for the security we provide them?" Noem opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Instead, Paul delivered the line that cracked the room open a second time. "Why should the American taxpayer pay for the security of billion-dollar corporations?" You could hear a staffer breathe too loudly in the corner. Someone shifted a chair. The tension had become a physical thing, heavy, unavoidable, pressing down on every person in the room. But then Paul shifted again, and this time, the tone grew darker. Much darker. He leaned forward, and his voice lost its earlier restraint. "With regard to the Quiet Skies program," he said, "I want answers." Noem stiffened. Paul continued. "It's horrifying that a former congresswoman, Tulsi Gabbard, was surveilled by federal air marshals. Another case, an air marshal's wife was followed." His voice trembled with controlled outrage. The cameras zoomed in. The headlines were writing themselves. "These are not the actions of a government protecting its people," Paul said. "These are signs of mission creep. Agencies expanding their power without public debate, oversight, or legal justification." Noem's responses offered no corrective plan, no assurance, just vague acknowledgments and promises of repercussions. But repercussions for whom? The violators or the whistleblowers? In an administration obsessed with secrecy and loyalty, the distinction mattered. This was the heart of the story: billions spent without coherent justification, federal resources deployed for private industry without accountability, surveillance programs running without clear limits, and a DHS secretary unable, or unwilling, to articulate guardrails that protect civil liberties. Paul leaned back, eyes calm, posture relaxed, yet the weight of his presence remained. He had done what he set out to do, not theatrics, not political posturing, but exposure. A spotlight on an agency that had grown too large, too opaque, and too comfortable in its own narrative. The room had shifted. The narrative had shifted. And the viewers, both present and across the nation, had witnessed something rare in politics: clarity, courage, and an uncompromising demand for truth. He allowed silence to stretch, letting the gravity of the moment resonate. The Quiet Skies file, the border wall funding, the corporate security expenditures, they were now undeniable, connected, forming a web of systemic mismanagement and overreach. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he placed his glasses gently on the desk. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The room knew what had transpired. The truth had been exposed, and there was no reversing it. The hearing didn't end with fireworks. It ended with recognition. With an undeniable understanding that what had just occurred was more than a political maneuver. It was a demonstration of what happens when accountability is demanded in a space built on omission and improvisation. As the committee adjourned, journalists filed out, already crafting headlines that would echo across media outlets. Rand Paul exposes DHS spending and surveillance gaps, billions unaccounted for, oversight demanded, quiet skies, wall funds, corporate security, a department under scrutiny. Staffers lingered, still digesting the magnitude of what had occurred. Noem remained, stoic but visibly shaken. Her talking points were irrelevant now. Her internal preparation had been exposed as insufficient. And for the first time, the gaps in the system she oversaw were public, undeniable, and impossible to dismiss. And somewhere in the quiet aftermath, the essence of the hearing lingered like a shadow. It was not simply about numbers, programs, or bureaucracy. It was about power, responsibility, and the fragile trust between a government and its citizens. And in that moment, one truth stood clear and unshakable: transparency is not optional. Accountability is not optional. And liberty, once compromised, is never easily restored. Rand Paul's calm intensity had left a mark. The room had shifted. The narrative had shifted. The American people had witnessed something rare in politics: the unflinching exposure of power, money, and surveillance. And while the story wasn't over, the first chapter had been written, in clarity, courage, and undeniable truth.